Okay, everyone, now we get to the fun stuff. We're going to be getting into infinitives this week. And in a lot of ways, it's going to tax you, especially if you are trained to understand English infinitives, because Greek infinitives really function nothing like that. In English, if you are familiar, you will know that infinitives tend to just be a kind of plain verbal form with the preposition to in front of it. So to jump, to play, to run. In Greek, as in many languages like Latin and others, is the infinitive is just one word. And so in a lot of ways, that functions just like a noun in English. And so the way these tend to get explained in grammatical circles is the Greek infinitive is a verbal noun. And so, as a verbal noun, it can do all kinds of things that nouns can do, but it can also do all kinds of things that verbs can do. So it kind of pushes in on those boundaries for us in our English understanding. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through some of the basic nuances of an infinitive in Greek, and then I'm going to give you, as we have in past lessons, a bunch of different ways that a Greek infinitive can function and can be translated into the English language. And so, much like you've done in the past, you're going to have a long list of different options, and as you work through the translations for this week, you're going to have to determine which way the infinitives are functioning. So, as you'll see in the lecture, I kind of give you some basic information on voices, as well as tenses and how they function with the infinitive. For the most part, you're not going to have to deal too much with that, but just suffice it to say that the infinitive in Greek will only take the present, the aorist, and the future tense, but it's not really going to affect your translation all that dramatically, but I have given you all that information if you're interested in reviewing it. Instead, we're going to spend most of our time looking at how the infinitive functions. So there are two primary ways, as I've kind of already stated, two primary ways it's going to function. It's either going to lean on the verbal side or lean on the noun side. And so the first category we're going to look at is adverbial infinitives. This is when the infinitive is functioning either with an article, so a definite article in particular, or as the object of a preposition. So you'll see that there are several major categories, the first of which is time. So, for example, it can refer to subsequent time, in which case it will have a particular construction, which I've noted for you here. And then as the infinitive follows it, it will either be with a definite article or without, with these particular prepositions. And it would be translated before. In other words, it is the main verb is happening subsequently to the infinitive. So the example I give here out of Luke 22:15, I desire to eat before I suffer. Okay. The next one is contemporaneous time, and this will happen with a particular construction, as I've noted here, and be translated while or as before it. So while he was sowing, some fell, and I'll actually show you that particular example at the end of the lecture here to show you how to work in the text. And then antecedent time, and this is generally noted with the construction meta ta, so the preposition meta with the definite article ta. All right. The next set that you will look at are cause, and so as you're working through these, kind of think back to what you did with a lot of the nominatives, genitives, and datives as you were translating them. And also with a lot of the prepositions, you're going to have to determine if it's functioning in one way or the other. With cause, you're going to add in the word because, and oftentimes, you'll see this happening, and I'll show you this in the example. There will be an accusative noun that's attached at the end of the construction that will function as the subject of the infinitive. So because it had no root. So the it would be the accusative that's functioning as the subject of the infinitive. Because it had no root, it withered. All right. The third option you're going to have is purpose, and I've given you a list here of different formulas that you might see that would indicate an infinitive of purpose. If so, then you would add the phrase "in order to" ahead of the verbal idea, which in this case would be crucified. The next category, the fourth category, is result. Again, I've given you a list of possible constructions that would precede the infinitive, and you would add the phrase "so that" in front of it to indicate that it is a result infinitive. The fifth category is means. In this particular case, I've given you the possible construction here, which is only one, and you would insert the phrase "by" or "by means of." You would also note, though, that this is the same option you would have with a contemporaneous time infinitive, so you have to determine based on the context which one you think it is. The sixth category is actually, I would hope, would be the easiest category for you, though it can be slightly tricky. It's going to be accompanied by one of these verbs here, boulamai, dunamai, mello, or zeteo. These are verbs that particularly need an infinitive to finish the idea. So I want, I am able, I am about, or I seek. It needs another verbal idea to complete it. So I want to jump, I am able to jump, I am about to jump, I seek to jump. So all of these verbs need an infinitive to finish their idea. So whatever that infinitive is that accompanies them, you call a complementary infinitive. In other words, it complements that particular verb. So the only time you're going to answer complementary is if the infinitive is adding on to the idea of these verbs that you also see in the text. All right. The epexegetical infinitive is the one that I often use when I say you can't really figure out what other category it goes into. And oftentimes it's just going to kind of give you an extra explanation of a noun or an adjective that it's accompanying. So the example I give here, the noun that it's modifying is worthy. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. So it's further explicating what he is not worthy of, namely to be called. That one's a little bit trickier, and I don't think I have a ton of examples where that's the answer, so don't worry too much about that one. And then the ninth category, or I'm sorry, it should be the eighth, I'm not sure why it skipped a number there, is manner. Again, I've given you the formula for this one, the pros ta, and this is an adverbial idea will almost always be translated with an ly. In other words, it will be translated straight into an adverb, and it's explaining the manner in which a verb is accomplished. So, lustfully is the example here in Matthew 5:28, the Sermon on the Mount. So what you'll need to do is translate the verbal idea to lust and then change it into an adverb, lustfully. So do not do something lustfully. All right. Or do not run quickly. Literally in English, it would be do not run too quick. You would have to change the too quick into quickly in order to make it an infinitive of manner. All right, so those are all the different adverbial infinitives. The last category that we're going to look at is when an infinitive is functioning as a noun. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to go back to our understanding of nouns, and you're going to have to interpret these particular infinitives with the idea that they're functioning as the subject, the object, as a manner of indirect discourse or in apposition to another noun. Okay, so let me explain what I mean by that. In this particular example here out of Luke 4:43, you see the literal translation here: to preach me, it is necessary the kingdom of God. It is necessary for me to preach the kingdom. So here the infinitive is to preach, and it is functioning as a subject. To preach the kingdom of God is necessary for me is literally what that says. So to preach is necessary. So the infinitive there is functioning as the subject of the verb is necessary. Right? So there, the infinitive is functioning as the subject. In other words, it's really being a noun there. You could almost say preaching is necessary for me, or preaching the kingdom of God is necessary for me. Infinitives can also function as a direct object. In other words, take the object of the main verb here, and now also complete the doing of it. So here the infinitive to do is receiving the action of the verb complete. Complete the doing. Complete the action. All right. Indirect discourse. This one is a little bit funky, and you won't see a lot of these, but they do happen, where the infinitive is functioning as a way of the technical term is indirect discourse. So let me show you this example here in Mark 12:18. Literally, it says, Sadducees who say resurrection not to be. The Sadducees who say, so you'll almost always get this introduction of the phrase who say or who are saying or something like that. And then the verb to be here in the infinitive form, there is how it gets translated. This is a way of introducing what they're saying. So who say not to be a resurrection. Here it just gets translated like a normal to be verb. There is no resurrection. Like I said, you won't get a lot of these, and your English translations will have already made sense of them for you. You have to just discern when they're the next word after an introduction of a sentence. So here, who say what? There is no resurrection. The appositional is when, like we've seen before, when the infinitive is renaming a previous noun in the sentence. So here, the example out of 1 Thessalonians 4:3, this is the will of God, sanctification of you, to abstain you from fornication. Literally, what we're dealing with here is the infinitive here, to abstain. This is the will of God, your sanctification, namely to abstain from fornication. So if you can insert this little adverb namely, and you can determine that this is functioning as a noun and not as an adverb, then you're likely dealing with an appositional infinitive. And that's your last option. So what I'm going to do here in our last minute and a half is I'm going to walk you through one particular example, and this is out of Matthew 13:4. So as I'm looking through this sentence, what I will find is that this particular word here, if I look down, it says it is a verb. Present active infinitive. You could also create a filter to show you all the infinitives, which I'm sure you all know how to do now. If not, let me know and I can walk you through that as well in a separate video. But this is the infinitive in Greek. Now, this is where it's going to be really important for you to transition to looking at the Greek text. You need to have it open because you need to look for certain things. So this is the infinitive, and I need to backtrack. I see there's a definite article here and also a preposition here. So if I look at it as a whole, I have a prepositional phrase with an infinitive and then an accusative noun after it, which means the accusative